Today we're talking with Mr. Lyle Perschke of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Mr. Perschke served in the Navy during the Second World War. Mr. Perschke, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your own background? Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Unity, Wisconsin. It's a little town of 300 and some people. And 1922, August 17th, 1922. And then
What did your family do?
my dad was a dry kiln operator for the American Seating Company in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. In 1925, Seating Company moved all their offices to here in Grand Rapids, and that's when we moved here in 1925. And I graduated from Union High School. I was captain in ROTC. I was drum major of the band in 1941. And then after I graduated, I went to American Seating Company, and I worked there till my draft notice came up, and I didn't want to go in the Army. I had enough of it in ROTC, so I enlisted in the Navy, and I went through boot camp at Great Lakes.
What was that? What was that like?
Well, when we went to on bus, we got off the bus at Great Lakes, and they had a bunch of those sailors and everything else. And every one of them hollered, "You'll be sorry!" And we wondered, what are we getting into, you know? But not when we had our physicals, and then we were assigned to a battalion, our company, and we had a southern DI, or he was a DI. And the first thing he did, I can recall it to this day, he lined us all up and he says, "Men, you're in the Navy now, and I expect you to bitch. Bitching is good for you, but God damn it, don't ever let me hear you bitch out loud." I'll never forget that. And then we wondered, what are we getting into? We were all in poor condition, but after we got through with boot camp, we could run around the track, a mile track, and we were in fairly good condition then. Well, then I come home, and my duty, I had to report to San Francisco for the Honolulu. I'd just come back from the Aleutian Islands, and because I played trumpet in band, I was a bugler in the Navy. And we went out to the South Seas. Namia, we helped transport a convoy.
Well, let's go back a little bit here. How did you get out to San Francisco?
We sailed underneath the Golden Gate Bridge.
How did you get to San Francisco?
Oh, by troop train, and that was another experience. It was hotter in the Dickens. I think they were converted cattle cars, really, and it was hot. And somebody would stick their head out the window and said, "Oh, there's another train coming." And you see a big cloud of dust, and we'd all duck back inside, and the sand would float inside. It was terrible, but we went through Texas, Yuma, Arizona. I can recall seeing Indians sitting at the station, you know, with their big hat and a feather and all. And when we got into San Francisco, we were put on Treasure Island there till they got our orders straight. Then I would put on the Honolulu, which was in dock in San Francisco.
And do you remember about what time of year that was?
That was somewhere in September.
So 42?
42,
Okay. And can you describe the ship a little bit?
Well, I never seen a ship that big when I went on, and they showed me where I could practice my bugle calls. That was way down in the hold somewhere where nobody could hear me, thank God. And I learned my bugle calls. And then we got our orders to sail out, and we went through underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. That was an experience, you know, never seen the Golden Gate Bridge and going underneath it. And then we caught this convoy. We were escorting the convoy, and on the way out in the ocean there somewheres, we ran upon a lone ship. We flashed our recognition signals, but it didn't flash any back. And I can remember the captain says, "Well, let's scare the hell out of them and see who it is." So we fired 2 rounds of 5-inch guns across his bow. Flashing lights come all over the place. You know, it was a Swedish freighter, and he passed our recognition. We went into Noumea, and that was French Noumea.
Yeah, New Caledonia.
Yeah,
Right.
New Caledonia. And being a young kid at 20 years old, it was something, you know. Seeing flying fish on the bow, see whales with spouts, you know. And from Noumea, we went to Espirito Santos. That was our recreation place, and we laid over there for a little while. Then we went to Tulagi, which is in Florida Islands, across straits from Guadalcanal.
Right.
And from there we went out to meet the Japanese Express, Tokyo Express, and we got torpedoed. First time, my duties on ship as bugler, I was up on the bridge. I had nothing to do for general quarters. And my first battle, I think it was the Battle of Kalamagura.
Let's see, well, there was one at Tassafaronga off of...
Tassafaronga, yeah. One of them, torpedoes were flying all over the place. And I seen one coming this way on the ship. I ran to the other side, and it passed underneath the ship. And then I seen a couple of them go sideways on the ship. I thought, oh my God. I was scared, really scared, you know, a young kid. And that's when was that the one that battle we got our bow blown?
That was Kalamagara. So Tassafaronga's first, and that's the one, that's a battle in which the Honolulu was about the only cruiser that didn't get hit with something.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little...
Helena got hit. We didn't know it until she was reported sinking. And a couple of destroyers got hit. We are credited, the Honolulu is credited with sinking a cruiser, 2 destroyers, and several airplanes. And we have 8, 9, I got 9 battle stars for landings on Guam, Saipan, Tinian, Philippine Islands. But the one that hit the bow, that was in the Battle of Tassafaronga.
Kalamagara.
The destroyer Gwyn was behind us, and she caught a torpedo, and she was on fire and almost rammed us. And the torpedo hit the bow. We were doing about 20 knots, and the bow folded under. The water come clear up over the bridge, come to a skidding halt, and I was scared shitless, you know. And then another torpedo hit the stern and drove in the stern about 2 feet, but it didn't go off. Thank God. And they asked for volunteers to push it out. They pushed it out. They plugged up the hole with mattresses and stuff. Well, from there, after the battle, we went back to Tulagi. Then we went back to Pearl. They put a false bow on the ship. We went back to Mare Island, and we were re-outfitted there.
Okay, well, let's pause a little bit. I'm going to go back. Tell me a little bit more about what it was like to be on the ship and heading into a fight? I mean, when you were going in for the first time, did you know you were looking for trouble or
Oh
looking
yeah,
for... Okay. So what did you know or not know at the time?
well, being up on the bridge, I had knowledge of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
We had the radar screen.
Mm-hmm.
The captain, he was the most coolest guy I've ever seen. He he didn't get rattled at
Mm-hmm.
all. Well, boys, I think we're going to be in for it now. And I was going to be substitute helmsman
Mm-hmm.
in case something ever came up, because I was on the wheel at
Mm-hmm.
the time. And we just kind of stood around in the chart house and being out of the way. And we could see the Japanese fleet on the radar.
Mm-hmm.
And they were probably about 16 miles out. We'd wait till they got about 10 miles out, then we'd open fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when all hell broke loose, you know. Our ships would be firing, they would be firing back at us. We had the windows in the pilot house dropped down.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't go into the conning tower,
Mm-hmm.
which was an armored conning tower
Mm-hmm.
at the time. We stayed up on the bridge. And the cordite, the burnt cork and everything would come flying back, and the smell and the noise. And we didn't have ear protection or anything.
Mm-hmm.
We'd stand there with our head, our ears over, hand over our ears, and shaking like crazy. I was scared, really scared. Well, then after the battle, then everything calmed down.
Mm-hmm.
We go back to port. Tulagi
Right.
was our base court, base there,
Mm-hmm.
and to repair whatever, reload the ship, and being up on the bridge, I didn't have to do any, or I always got out of
Mm-hmm.
loading ammunition and stuff, and the other guys, they were sweating their backs off, you know, with 6-inch shells, because
Mm-hmm.
we had 6-inch casings,
Right.
and then the shell besides,
Mm-hmm.
and besides the food and everything else, and we'd always stay up on the bridge and get out of the way so we wouldn't have to do it. And I was lucky on the N division, which I was in. We got out of most of the heavy work.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice. I can actually say that. And then our rest time and everything, our time off, we'd play a lot of setback
What's that?
cards.
Okay.
And I forget how to even play it now.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we'd sleep on the deck for our time off,
Mm-hmm.
we'd put our shoes on the deck and rest our head between the shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd get underneath the gun turret because there's shade. And that's how we spent our days, hotter than the dickens down below, because we didn't have air conditioning on the ship. And I was 3 decks below.
Mm-hmm.
My bunk was three bunks up,
Mm-hmm.
and we each had a locker, and it was pretty close confined living
Mm-hmm.
and everything. But we were able to survive.
Did you get much of an opportunity to get off the ship? I mean, when you go to New Caledonia
We
or
went
these places?
to our recreation was at
It was
Santos,
Espiritu Santo, so New
Espiritu
Hebrides then,
Santos.
yeah.
and I was my time on the quarterdeck for being on the watch on the quarterdeck
Mm-hmm.
for the guys going ashore. We each got, I think it was 3 tickets for free beer,
Mm-hmm.
and the captain or the officer of the deck would send me down to the exec's office to get the tickets, and somehow I always had a couple extra,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So then we could sell the beer for $1 a bottle to the guys that didn't drink. They'd sell it for $1
Mm-hmm.
a bottle, and we always had a good time. We were to learn how to peel coconuts, because coconuts are dropping all
Mm-hmm.
over, crazy down there, and it was interesting. You know, it was good to get off the ship like that, and then we'd have swimming call in the harbor,
Mm-hmm.
and in those days, uh, we had one time I remember they spotted a 10-foot shark swimming around, and we had a company of Marines on the ship that was part of the.
Mm-hmm.
They stood up on the top of the turrets with their rifles, and it swam off. We didn't see it, but we went swimming in the harbor like that, and it wasn't the cleanest harbor in the
Mm-hmm.
world because you dumped all your waste and everything, and it's just good to get off the ship and swim though.
Right.
Push things aside, you know, and come back and take a shower quick. And we always had fresh water on the ship because that salt water,
Mm-hmm.
you mix that with soap and gummier and the dickens.
Yep.
And but I can remember one time we were back in San Francisco, and the Liberty ship was early in the morning, and the Liberty ship was just pulling away from the dock, loaded with all the sailors going back to the ship. Here comes the captain's boy running down the deck with two captain's uniforms on his
Mm-hmm.
arm, running like crazy. Wait, wait, wait! And everybody on this boat hollered, "Jump, jump, jump!" He jumped. He missed it by about that far. And the captain's uniforms, they got all soaking wet, and the gold braid started turning green from the salt water. Oh, we laughed and laughed and laughed, and I don't know whatever happened to him on that, but we pulled him ashore, pulled him up. But everybody hollered, "Jump, jump!" And that poor guy jumped, and that was one of the most funny things that happened.
In general, how did you were a new crewman or replacement coming on.
I was new, yeah.
And were there a lot of guys on the Honolulu who had been there through its first year or so in service?
Yeah, they were still in service, and they treated us real good,
Mm-hmm.
and they showed us around, explained what we had to do, and being a bugler. Then after we come back to the United States to get our valve fixed up, we went to Vallejo, California, where Mare Island is, and another buddy and I, we were sitting in a bar and drinking, and I heard him say, "Well, if you're a Spaniard, go to hell." I turned around, half drunk, see what was going on, and I got sucker punched, just like that.
Wow.
It broke split my lip.
Mm-hmm.
I busted out 4 teeth. My head landed up against the Nickelodeon on the floor. Blood coming out all over. Barmaid rushed up, stuck an old bar rag in my mouth. And to this day, I don't know who done it. But that ended my bugle days.
Mm-hmm.
So then after they took me to the hospital, sewed up my lip, and it was all underneath,
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to strike for quartermaster.
Mm-hmm.
And after about a year, I made quartermaster 3rd class.
What did a quartermaster do on the ship?
The quartermaster, he took care of the log when we were underway, and he was also a helmsman, and we were in navigation, correct charts, and in case you wouldn't want to run up against a sandbar someplace, and they taught us how to sight the stars, shoot the stars rather.
Right.
And I wasn't that good at it. My mathematics wasn't up to par, but I was able to pass the exam and everything. And I was quartermaster, third class, till we got to the landing at Leyte Gulf,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was made second class just before, as my promotion came through on the way to Leyte Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Leyte Gulf we bombarded, and then at around 4 o'clock we were told just to lay to, and so I went down to the library to get a book
Mm-hmm.
to read, and all of a sudden the ship started firing 40 millimeters. So I ran topside to see what was going on, and just as I stepped onto the main deck, the torpedo hit in the area that I was
Mm-hmm.
at, and it killed 80 some guys
Wow.
down there, and it knocked me out temporarily. When I came to, I ran up to the bridge, and we were listing 15 degrees, and they had several tugs come alongside, pump water out,
Mm-hmm.
and they towed us into close to the beach, so we'd have about 10 feet of water under us in case we did sink.
Right.
It wouldn't go down. And then that night they had another air raid, and destroyers laid a big smoke screen around us.
Mm-hmm.
And some ship way out in the harbor started firing, and he didn't go up high enough, and it hit our 40 millimeter bridge.
Ouch.
On the bridge, 40 millimeter ammunition on the bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and it killed 3 guys and wounded 14. I was on the other side of the pilot house,
Mm-hmm.
fortunately.
Mm-hmm.
God was with me all this time, and shrapnel was flying all over, but we dragged him into the chart room, patched him up
Mm-hmm.
the best we could and everything. And then they took us into, they couple of days later, they towed us into Admiralty Islands,
Mm-hmm.
into dry dock,
Mm-hmm.
which was about 2 weeks later, really. And they took all the water out of the compartment, and we had to bring up our dead bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was terrible, the smell, the stench. And then I got transferred. I come home on a destroyer. That's when I caught the Colbert,
Mm-hmm.
and I was home for Christmas, and that was a lot of fun,
Mm-hmm.
because a buddy of mine, he was in the Navy. He lived about a quarter of a mile away from me. We were buddies before.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the Navy. He was home on leave.
Mm-hmm.
So we would go up and down Leonard Street at the bars, you know. We had a wonderful time. I was going with my wife at the time, but we weren't married.
Mm-hmm.
And she made an ultimatum. Either it's me or him, you know. So, so I says, it's you. So I was still, that's when my folks, they footed the bill to get my teeth repaired.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back. I caught the USS Colbert, which was an APA.
Can you describe what kind of ship that was?
APA was a troop transport. It was a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was brought up to, we went to Astoria, Oregon. And I was second class at the time. And we had to provision the ship, correct all the charts, and get it ready for sea. And then from Astoria, we went to Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
We picked up some company or a battalion, whatever it was, of soldiers to go to Ulithi.
Mm-hmm.
And on the way out, the first day out, we ran into 20-foot sea swells, you know. So they feed them greasy fried potatoes and greasy pork chops.
Mm-hmm.
And they all heaved their guts out. It was terrible.
Was that something that pretty much anybody goes through when they first start sailing on the ocean? I mean, were you getting sick when you started?
No, I never was seasick. I never got seasick. A lot of times I thought I was going
Mm-hmm.
to, so I go topside. Well, I was with Honolulu too. We hit some pretty rough weather.
Mm-hmm.
We were probably 40-foot waves, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and the wind was probably 60, 70 miles an hour. And going into the Philippine Islands, our task force, we ran into a typhoon,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when 4 destroyers rolled over
Mm-hmm.
and got sunk.
Mm-hmm.
And we were pitching around like crazy on that. And I'm kind of backtracking here
That's
and
okay.
there, but we couldn't have breakfast or set the plates down.
Right.
They'd hang coffee pots from the overhead, and you catch it for a cup of coffee, you know. And when I thought I was going to get seasick, I go topside,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of settled my stomach, and I could look up, and the wave was way up here, and you're way down here. Pretty soon you're way up there.
Mm-hmm.
The waves are way down there. It's a scary feeling, really.
Yeah. Did you ride out some of these storms while you were on duty and up on the bridge?
Yeah.
So what was that like? Was it better to be up high, or was it better
It's-
to be down lower somewhere?
It's better to be up high. Low is you get more. You don't get as much action because you're up high. You're swinging
Mhm.
around, you know. But at least you can see what you're doing and everything. And steering was really bad then because we'd head into the waves,
Mm-hmm.
and the water, the spray would come clear up over the bridge, and we'd dip underneath the waves and then come up over. It was you see pictures of it, you
Mhm.
know, and I've been through several times like that. But on the Colbert, that was a brand new ship then, and we went to Ulithi and dropped off these soldiers there. We had they had a boatload of Japanese prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
So we brought those back to the United States. Then we loaded another load of soldiers, and we went to Okinawa.
Did you get much chance to just sort of have a look at the Japanese prisoners, or?
We didn't get to have too much to do with them, no, at that time. But we went to Okinawa, disembarked those guys, and that's when the kamikazes were all over the place. And then again, I was scareder than the dickens.
Mm-hmm.
And one kamikaze missed us maybe about 50 yards.
Were the kamikazes targeting the transports and ships like
No,
yours?
they weren't really. It was shot down, I think, and he just happened to go about 50 yards off from us. And then after Okinawa, we went back to, we were at Buckner Bay. We got orders to go to Port Byron, Manchuria. And on the way up, we exploded about 4 or 5 floating mines. We could see them, you know, floating around. And we pulled into Jinsan, Korea. And we looked at my brother-in-law, he was in Korea, and we looked for Jinsan, and they changed the name evidently because it's not there anymore. And then from Jinsan we went to Port Byron, Manchuria. And we picked up our prisoners from Corregidor that were in the Mugden prison camp. And while we were waiting for them, oh, this is another story. While we were waiting for them, Russian admiral, the Russians had taken over the town of Dyron, and we could hear shooting all night long, you know. But we had a Russian admiral and his staffer coming on board to talk with our captain, and we had a pet Cocker Spaniel on the ship. And here comes the admiral and his staff way down, and the dog, he decided to take a crap on the quarterdeck. And the captain, he looked at me, we called the dog Admiral. He said, "Admiral, you're on report for shitting and pissing on the quarterdeck." And we had to clean it up quick, you know. And the Russian Admiral, he had sidearms and everything on. And the whole staff had it. They were all armed. But on the way up, we had several scares, submarine scares. And I had to go down and wake the captain up. And the dog all slept in the captain's quarters. And I woke the captain up. He slept just in his skivvies, you know. And I woke him up. I said, "Captain, we got a sub-scare. What's your pleasure, you know?" He says, "I'll be right up." He jumped out of his bunk, and the dog took a crap there, and he stepped in it. And I think if he found that dog, he would have kicked him overboard. And it was all I could do is keep from laughing, you know. And when I told the rest of the guys about it, oh, we all just hee-hawed and everything else about that. But
now, at this point, when you're having sub-scares and so forth, the war's over, right? I mean,
the war was over at that time, yeah.
but were there still Japanese submarines out there?
I'm sorry, floating mine.
Mines, okay.
Floating mine, because you could spot them on radar. Radar after the war was 100 times better than what it was the first time I went on Honolulu.
Right.
They had really getting back to after they refitted the Honolulu at Mare Island, they put us in with new radar, and we had to go through the San Juan River, I think it is.
Okay.
And it was real foggy that day when the captain says, "Well, let's see how this new radar works out." So I was up on the bridge, my normal place, and real foggy, you couldn't see very, and you could see the radar, the buoys on the radar, and we went through the whole San Juan River at about 15 knots, which is a pretty good speed, you know, for a 10,000-ton ship. And just very well pleased with the radar and everything.
Did you, once the Honolulu was refitted, did you have to deal with any more Japanese ships, or was it just aircraft at that point and mines?
Most of the time after our battles with the Tokyo Express, then it was bombardments with Guam, Saipan, Tinian, Green Island, the Philippine Islands, and on the way, then I'm going to go back from when I was on the APA, coming back from Dairon. We ran into a typhoon. The waves are running 90-foot high, 100-mile-an-hour winds, and I was down in the mess hall, and I can recall it to this day. I was drinking coffee. Instead of a cup, I had a soup bowl. And when the mine hit the engine room, which was just on the other side of the mess hall, separated by a watertight compartment, I threw that soup bowl up over my head. I took off for the ladder, and I went topside to see what was going on. My battle station was the bridge, and that's when I found out that we hit this floating mine, and it blew out the engine room, and we were wallowing around all day long before a cruiser, I forget which one it was, got a line over to us, and to get succession of lines, first a little tiny line, they shoot it with a gun, you know, and then a bigger one, then a hawser, and they finally towed us into Okinawa Bay, Buckner Bay, and then 4 days later, all the ships started going out of the bay. Another typhoon was coming, and here we are with no way to get underway. We dropped both anchors and the stern anchor, and then the wind started picking up, and it broke our anemometer at 90 miles an hour, and the spray was so thick I couldn't see a half inch beyond the ship.
Mhm.
We were in kind of like a stateroom where
Mhm.
the petty officers slept, and then we had the sensation of moving, but we didn't know. And when it all passed over, we were clear on the other side of the bay, and we had about 6 feet of water underneath us. And then I had enough points to get out,
Mhm.
and they put me on a little baby aircraft carrier. Then I came on home.
Mhm.
I landed in San Francisco, and then they put me on another train. That's another story. On the train, everything moved by train, you know. And there's a bunch of us sailors going to Great Lakes to get discharged.
Right.
And we all had a couple of bottles of booze in our luggage. Not that I drink or anything,
Mhm.
but the coach ahead of us was a colored band,
Mhm.
Lucky Millender. I'll never forget. They were all colored band,
Mhm.
and we got to drinking, sharing our bottles with
Mhm.
them. We stopped in Reno.
Mhm.
They get to the baggage compartment, get their instruments
Mhm.
out. We had a ball all the way across, drinking and playing.
Mhm.
We had a ball. I mean, one sailor, he had almost 4 or 5 fifths of whiskey.
Mhm.
I had one. A couple others had 1 or 2, you know. Oh, we had a blast coming on home. The war was over,
Mhm.
and I got discharged December 16th, 45.
Mhm.
I came home, and then I went back to the American Seating Company, and I got married. My wife, my girlfriend then, I was going with her before the war.
Mhm.
She waited for me.
Mhm.
We got married July 11th, and then a year later, we had our son.
Mhm.
He's a sales rep for Air Gas
Mhm.
in Indiana now, and eventually I made tool and die maker
Mhm.
at the American Seating and Research Department,
Mhm.
and then I retired after 47 years at the American Seating Company. And after I retired, I thought, this isn't for me. I wish I would have stayed.
Mhm.
So then I went to work part-time at Riley's Hardware,
Mhm.
and I stayed there for 5 years. We had a little disagreement. I quit. I went to Home Depot for 5 years.
Mhm.
They told me new store manager came on. He said all part-timers would have to work nights and weekends.
Mhm.
And I said, no, I don't work nights and weekends. So I quit. Riley's took me back again. And so then from there, I went out to Riley's on Remembrance Road.
Mhm.
And I stayed there for, it must have been about 5 years, something like that. And I finally decided it was enough.
Mhm.
So then here I am.
Right.
But my things nowadays, I drive antique trucks and parades for Powell Moving Company, and I have a 1966 Mustang, fully restored.
Wow.
I go to car shows with that. So that's, and my wife passed away 3 years ago, so that gives me an out to whatever I want to do. So that's my story.
Okay. Let me just follow up with a couple of other questions here. You talked about going over to Manchuria to pick up prisoners. These were the people, the Americans who've been captured
They
on
were
Corregidor?
captured from Corregidor.
Mm-hmm.
They
Now,
were on the death march.
mm-hmm.
And then from the death march, they put them on to a Moncton prison camp.
Mm-hmm.
We got to talk with the prisoners,
Mm-hmm.
and the stories they told, how they were treated.
Mm-hmm.
They would line them all up, and the commander from the camp, he'd run at them with his samurai sword,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe he'd stop, maybe he wouldn't, you know. And their food was terrible,
Mm-hmm.
and they were put in machine shops to help the Japanese,
Mm-hmm.
but then they pick pieces of their legs or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
throw them in fresh concrete and stuff
Mm-hmm.
to kind of sabotage
Mm-hmm.
what they could, you know. And if one of them would escape and get caught, they'd bring them back and shoot them in front of the whole
Mm-hmm.
bunch. This is what you get if you try to escape.
Right.
And the stories that they tell, I can't remember all of them,
Mm-hmm.
but we thought, my God, what you guys went through, the death march and going up there.
Right.
The Japanese, anybody that was captured was inferior.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they believed.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they treated our prisoners like they did. And we had Japanese on the transport from Ulithi
Mm-hmm.
back to the States, but we didn't get to talk with them.
Right.
And then on the cruiser, I can remember during the battle when Japanese sailors were in the water,
Mm-hmm.
we would try to pick them up.
Mm-hmm.
They would bang their heads up against the side of the ship
Mm-hmm.
to knock themselves out so that they would
Mm-hmm.
not be captured. And many times we'd see them banging their heads up
Mm-hmm.
there. We'd try to get them, but they didn't want to be captured
Mm-hmm.
because they thought we would shoot them
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, you know.
Or it was just dishonorable, so
Yeah,
you
it
weren't
was
supposed to be
honorable to
captured.
be-
Yeah.
To be killed that way.
Did we'll let that go first.
Well, I can't turn that thing off either. Should be it. Should be it.
There we go. Now, the ship you were on did not dock at Japan then? You were Okinawa and Manchuria, or did you make it to Japan?
I didn't make it to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
No. Okinawa was, the closest I
Right.
got to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But I did sail up through the Sea of Japan
Mm-hmm.
when we went to Korea
Right.
and like that, and Leyte Gulf, the Philippines,
Mm-hmm.
and I was at Guam, Saipan, Tinian,
Mhm.
Palau. When the war ended, I was on the APA at
Mhm.
Yap Island.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little small
Right. In
island
the Carolines, yeah.
in the Carolinas, and we just celebrated. They had no duty at all
Mhm.
day long. Just they broke out the best food that we could
Mhm.
get on the ship and everything else. I can recall that. But
Yeah. Do you remember hearing about the first atomic bomb? Did you learn about that, or was it?
we heard about it. We couldn't believe it,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't remember too much about
Mhm.
it. I have my wife was a great saver,
Mm-hmm.
and I have papers downstairs
Mm-hmm.
from the Grand Rapids Herald.
Mm-hmm.
The war is over in 1945
Mhm.
from Japan. I still got that downstairs. I'm saving that for the boy,
Mhm.
There's a lot of things I'm saving for him.
Right.
But I can, she saved that. We have some other papers and stuff, for the war.
Had you been thinking at all about, or were you in preparation for invading Japan? Did you figure that your ship would be involved with that?
I can recall talking to our navigation officer about this invasion coming up,
Mm-hmm.
because it was going all over the ship that we were going to invade Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, it is going to be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
He said, when and if we do invade, he said, the losses are going to be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all kind of worried about that. But then we went up to pick up our prisoners, you
Mhm.
know, and bring them on home. That was before before we went up there.
Mm-hmm.
We were at Okinawa
Mm-hmm.
talking about invading Japan
Right,
and stuff. But I can recall at Okinawa, gunburst way up in
Mhm.
our proximity fuses, you know, would just explode all over
Right.
the sky and everything. It was a lot to go through,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't go through near as much as these guys
Yeah.
that had Normandy Beach
Mm-hmm.
and Okinawa,
Mm-hmm.
Iwo Jima, and I did go through, but nothing what they went through.
Mm-hmm.
So
How do you think the wartime experience affected you, or kind of shaped the way you look at things?
after the war, I was real jumpy, nervy.
Mm-hmm.
Slightest noise, I'd react, I'd jump,
Mm-hmm.
and it took me about a year to calm down,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I started drinking a little bit heavy, and my wife, she put her foot down on
Mhm.
that, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I adjusted to civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think your experience in any way sort of helped you or gave you strengths or qualities that were useful later, or was it just something you kind
I
of got
grew
through?
up in one big hurry.
Mm-hmm.
I was immature when I went in.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose any kid at
Yep.
19, 20, but I sure learned the facts of life.
Mm-hmm.
And from boot camp on, I woke up in a hurry,
Mm-hmm.
and I matured in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
We had one guy on the ship in boot camp. He lived in Lansing. He refused to take a shower, and so we gave him what they call a kai bath,
Which is?
which is a kai scrub brush, and we soaped him all up and just rubbed the living daylights out of
Mhm.
him. He was the first ones in the shower.
Mm-hmm.
The next time after that, but he was the only one that we had to give a kayak bath to, and we had to scrub our own clothes, and put them out in the dry. They had stencils with our name on them, you know, stencils, and I had when on the Honolulu, I got acquainted with he went with me and a couple others from boot camp to the Honolulu.
Mm-hmm.
He was from Kentucky, and he couldn't read or write,
Mhm.
just read his name and that was it. And he asked me if I would read his letters to him, write his letters,
Mm-hmm.
and he was put down in the ship's laundry
Mm-hmm.
on the Honolulu, and I always got special care, you know, from him, being his writer and
Mhm.
reader
Right.
and everything like that. I don't recall his name now, but he was from Kentucky. I can recall a couple of them saying they never had wore shoes before they got
Mhm.
in the Navy, you know. And I couldn't say for sure if they did or not, but this is one thing that in the back of my mind. But it was an experience, and to this day I still believe that every boy and girl, after they get out of school, they should put a year or two in the service.
Mm-hmm.
They would teach them how to grow up, what life is all about. They'd wake them up in a hurry.
Most likely.
Yeah.
And these days, with all the things going on in Iraq
Oh.
and how easy it was to send people over there and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
maybe different now. This is going way back a little bit. Why did you pick the Navy?
Because I had ROTC,
Mm-hmm.
and they told me then that the professor that we had for
Mhm.
ROTC, he said we would join the Army, he would see to it that we were sent to officers training camp.
Mm-hmm.
But the Army going through the mud fields and
Mm-hmm.
stuff didn't appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my folks, if I'm going to get killed, I'd rather be on the water.
Mm-hmm.
So I enlisted. My draft number was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So then I enlisted, and my folks, they took me down to the train station. From the train station, went to Great Lakes, and to Chicago, and we boarded a bus
Mm-hmm.
to Great Lakes. Like I said, we got off the bus in 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they all hollered, "You'll be sorry."
Yeah.
We wonder what are we getting into, you know. But boot camp was more or less marching and drilling, which I had more experience
Mm-hmm.
than any of the others,
Right.
and I had that. But we never had to march or anything else in the Navy after that, you know. So, but it was getting you in condition. That's
Right.
what the whole thing is.
Mm-hmm.
In running, God, I was a puny little kid. I only weighed 112 pounds
Mm-hmm.
then, and in boot camp they didn't have bunks for us to sleep in. They had hammocks,
Mm-hmm.
and hammocks were stretched out about 4 foot above the floor,
Mm-hmm.
and I never slept in a hammock before, and it was hell to get in and out of. Once you got in, you hoped that you didn't flip out. So what some of the guys would do, we had what they call lash ropes, that in the morning we'd have to roll up our hammocks,
Mm-hmm.
and with this rope, lash them up, you know. They were probably about 15, 20 foot long. So they tied to some guy's hammock way far away. As soon as he got on, they'd give it a quick jerk, you know, and flip him onto the floor. Then we'd all bust out laughing,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Well, the chief, he'd come running up there, and he'd bawl us all out, you know, and I don't want to hear this going on now, damn it, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but every once in a while somebody would do what you can, you know. But we didn't have, towards the end of the war, the guys, they all had bunks and stuff, but we had hammocks, and it was an experience getting used to sleeping in those things, because, well, there's only about so foot wide, you
Mhm.
know, and we had to string them up between very big poles here and U-bars, you know, and string them up, and getting into them was something else, but it was an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're bringing back a lot of memories, you know.
That's part of what we're here for.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that's now popped into your head that you want to put onto the record?
Oh, golly. Nothing that I can recall of right now.
Okay.
I think you got just about everything.
All right then. Well, thank you very much for talking to
Well,
us.
Jim, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you can make something of it. Now, do you